episode of the Alma Ensemble Summer Interview Series. We've got Sarah Wardle-Jones with us.
Hello.
And Erica Sipes.
Hello.
And I am Michelle Smith-Johnson. We are the co-founders of the Alma Ensemble, a chamber music collective based in Roanoke, Virginia. So coming to us from Canada today, we're getting musicians from all around the world. Spectacular. I'm so excited. Pianist, pedagogue, recording artist, chamber musician, Sandra Mogensen is here with us today. Welcome, Sandra. How are you? How are things in Ontario?
Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Things are good. Things are good here, you know, all things considered. Yeah, and it's a bit of a surprise that I find myself here, but I landed in my childhood home on the first day of the lockdown. And I'm taking this house over. Who knew this is where I'd end up? But yeah, it's incredible. It's just reconfiguring it so that it's my space now, and it's taking some time to do it all. But yeah, it's amazing. What a blessing.
Well, it looks beautiful.
Well, there's a lot of spots that have much more chaos, but got to create one space at a time, you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
So Sandra, I've known you, is it 10 years now?
I think so, yeah.
And so you and I met on Twitter, but then I had the great fortune to be able to meet you in person earlier this year before all this happened. I mean, thank goodness that you were able to come and grace us with a concert. And I got to visit with you quite a bit. So I know your story, but our listeners do not.
Right.
So can you just give us, I don't know, a little bit of a journey through your career, what jobs you've had, because I know you've had a lot of different things that you've done, and where in the world have those different things brought you?
Well, first, let me say the honor is mine, having had the opportunity to meet you in Roanoke, like 1 month before this whole crazy shift of life happened. So amazing now to meet the rest of you. Yeah, so my journey, it's a long and complicated story. So I did my undergrad studies in London, Ontario, which I always thought was the real London when I was growing up, because it's just an hour from my hometown, but turns out there's another London. Anyway, so I ended up doing actually an artist diploma at University of Western Ontario. And that was a good time to discover a lot about being a human and being an artist, and being the whole world of art song opened up to me during that time. And that's been a passion ever since. Collaborating with singers in particular is one of my great loves, as well as solo playing. So from there, in fact, I never have been super comfortable being in a school environment. So after 3 years there, I just had to flee for a little bit, and I had an opportunity to go to Copenhagen, which is where my dad is from. My uncle there was working at the Royal Danish Conservatory, and so he set it up for me that I could have access to just take a year out and practice. I had access to incredible studios. Every studio there had high ceilings, 2 Steinway grands, windows that actually open, which was after being at Western University. Windows, they don't open. What are you thinking? So I did a good year of really just practice, and learning Danish, and living with my famo, my grandmother, and just kind of finding myself a little bit. I guess that was when I was about 21. And then I reluctantly went back to Canada and somehow finished off the final year of that undergrad. So that was that. And then I did a crazy thing for a performing pianist. I had an experience of Orff. Do you know what Carl Orff, the method for little kids to learn rhythm, music, movement. My aunt was an Orff teacher, so I had an experience through a conference I went to. And then somehow I found myself accepted into, it's called a special course in the Orff Institute at the Mozarteum in Salzburg, Austria. So that was like a 5-month course. And I don't know, didn't really know what else to do at that time. And I was accepted as like 15 people worldwide were accepted. So it was kind of a neat, taught in English. And so I went there, and that really informed a lot of how I process music, how I practice, how I, that's something I feel a kinship with you, Erica, with the, how to practice. That's so key to success. Anyway, so that was a lovely experience of living in Austria. Came back from there and still was kind of, okay, now what do we do? So at that point, I decided to spend a little bit of time in my hometown teaching piano, just full on 40 students a week. I'd grown up with piano teaching in my home because my mother was a piano teacher. So it seemed like a normal thing. So, but I didn't plan to stay. I just wanted to kind of have a little time of getting grounded and figuring out the next step. So lots of teaching, which, it was very, I think it's really set me up to feel confident as a pedagogue. Of course, I've built on that a lot over the however many thousand years since then. So there's a lot of nomadic kind of here, there, everywhere. And then I lived in Toronto, our sort of main musical community in this part of the world. Did a lot of work with singers during that time, began really coaching and working with an amazing singing teacher, Bernard Diamant, who was the teacher of Maureen Forrester. I was his studio pianist. So yeah, it's all still my education. God knows what I did then. Oh, I think then after a few years, maybe 5 years in Toronto, had the man in my life. We had to have some children, so we moved out of Toronto where we could afford a house and blah, blah. Did some university teaching in a town called Waterloo, Ontario, which is an hour from Toronto. And then, I had 2 children. That's a whole big chapter, of course. And then their father was like, okay, I gotta go. So then I became a single parent. And from there, it meant, how do we do this? How do you be a pianist and raise your kids alone? So I did an even crazier thing than going to an Orff Institute as a pianist. I went to Princeton, New Jersey, to Westminster Choir College to do a master's degree as a single parent of a nearly 4-year-old and 6-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah. But I just knew that I had to, because I had in the meantime met Dalton Baldwin, who was kind of a significant mentor for me, and he was teaching there. So we moved to Princeton, the little family, and somehow made it through, and that was life-changing. That was important. Lots of work as a coach and pianist to singers, and just really got to know that amazing repertoire. And so that was really important to do, although grueling, I might add, as a single parent. So then what happened? Then it was clear that I need to come back to the homeland here, Canada. And to clinch that, the day that I was coming back with all my stuff in a big truck, including a grand piano, that was September 11th, 2001.
Oh,
Thank God
wow.
my dad had come down with me to collect all my stuff with me and drive back with me. And we got stuck outside of Buffalo, who knows where, for like 10 hours sitting on the highway. So the next morning, finally, we were allowed to cross the border. And I kind of felt like, okay, this was the right decision for now. So the time that I spent in the US there, it was really brilliant and so fantastic. But again, it seemed to have its beginning and its end very dramatically. Yeah. And so then where would I live now? So I ended up in this beautiful small town called Stratford, Ontario. And yes, of course, Stratford theater town. And so therefore it's a small town in 30 odd thousand, but very much a cultural little hub because of this theater, which is well known across North America as a repertory theater. So that was a great place to bring my kids up and still be an artist. It was kind of normal to be in the creative pursuits in that town. So that was fantastic. And then lived there until 2012. In the meantime, my son had passed away in 2010. So it still meant, okay, well now who am I and what do I create from here? So from 2012, selling the house, then that enabled me and my daughter to kind of explore the world and who we are and what do we want and where next. So during the last 8 years, it's been a lot of travel, a lot of trying things out, a bit more time in Toronto, Copenhagen, Scotland. And then, here I am in my hometown again. And it's perfect. Yeah. So, my mother has recently moved to a retirement residence. So the house was going to sit empty, or I could take it over and zhuzh it up a bit, So in those years, though, as a single parent, oh God, I'm blathering on. Anyway, as a single parent, it meant always having to balance the being a parent, being available to the kids, having enough food on the table. So like being present and yet doing work. So being in Stratford was really great for that. Small town, good sense of community. And I tried a lot of different aspects of being a pianist during that time so that I could maintain that balance of single parent. I worked in the theater as assistant musical director, sometimes as rehearsal pianist, did some arranging and conducting. I worked in churches, first a Catholic church and then an Anglican church as organist. I would never call myself an organist, but I did play on an organ. And I would never, admit to an organist that I did that. Anyway, but that was great for community and building some more skills, learning about liturgy. So doing that and then teaching piano students who came to my home, playing for a beautiful children's choir in that area that my own kids were in. So that was a nice way to, kind of hang out with them, but also make some money while I wait for their choir. Yeah, so that, I really enjoy choral accompanying. It just meant saying yes to a lot of ways of being a pianist. So that I could still be present. Also done adjudicating when my parents were available to babysit those kids. Then I could go off and do adjudicating of music festivals, which is a big thing in Canada. I don't know if you have something equivalent in the US. And also the Royal Conservatory of Music in Canada. I was a senior examiner. And again, that involved traveling around the country, listening and evaluating exams. So so many ways, so much so that, eventually you get kind of, okay, I need to now focus on, so that's where I am now, very much more focused on, this is what I want to do. So
that's incredible.
Long
and
story.
You've worn, I know that's awesome. There's so much packed in that short amount of time. You've worn so many hats and have been so many different things to so many different people. Well, let's talk about your performance self for a minute. So you've performed in lots of different places, traveled the world, and lots of different, lots of different capacities as a solo pianist, a chamber musician, and a collaborative pianist. What has been one of your most memorable performance experiences?
Oh, wow. I would say that That's a really tough question to answer, because I do feel like every performance is memorable in its own way. And that's maybe sounds cheesy, but I feel like every performance is such a heightened experience and such a gift of tuning into that feeling that you have, that connection with the listeners. And of course, in collaborating with others, like that's just a beautiful, incredible, heightened energy that goes on. So that's hard to pick. But just to pick, I would say one of the more recent highlights for me was in this tour that I did of the US in February, just before we all are stuck in our homes, happily stuck in our homes. I was invited to perform in Dallas as a distinguished artist, and at the St. Matthew Cathedral of the Arts. And they have a lovely little space with an amazing instrument there. And wow, you sit down at an instrument that just kind of does what you ask it to do, almost before you ask it to do. It was that level of instrument. And I luckily had a couple of days of enjoying getting to know it ahead of the concert. So then in the concert, I could just feel the lovely community who were very attentive and very responsive to this music by female composers, which is all new to them, as it had been new to me like a year and a half ago. So yeah, that was a really, really lovely. They treated me like just distinguished royalty. It was such a lovely trip. My first time in Texas. And then, of course, that was followed by a brilliant trip to your part of the world there. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that would be the most exciting recent thing, which I thought I was going to be building on.
Yeah.
And now it's a matter of
hit the pause button.
How do we do this now?
Yeah. Well, so speaking of women composers, you recently came out with a series of recordings featuring piano works by female composers. And of course, we're really excited about that. So can you tell us some about how this project came to be? What made you interested in that? Mm-hmm. Is this part of a series? Tell us some about this project.
Thank you. Yeah. So I had been already sort of inquiring, researching a little bit into, especially Clara Schumann. A couple of years ago, I read a couple of her biographies, and I was looking into, just in general, but the fire hadn't really been lit until as part of this another extra crazy chapter, when it turned out in the fall of 2019 that maybe Copenhagen, not quite right now. I had a very stressful accommodation thing blow up, so I had to take a little bit of a leave from there. And so I found myself kind of on a self-funded, self-styled sabbatical. It had been planned for a year. Perhaps this is another adjunct to it, this lockdown, where I was house sitting in order to make my way. So one of the house sit situations was January of, what year? Okay. Anyway, that was 2019. I said it was 2018. So this house sit where this all started to fall into place was January of 2019. I was in Stratford again, where I had lived all those years. And some friends are away for the winter, so I had their beautiful house. It had an upright Steinway piano, and it was just like, wow, I got all this space to myself to do what? January in Stratford, I might add, is bleak. It is so bleak. I mean, it's a little snow belt surrounded by, it's still Canada, but that part is dramatic with that. Sometimes you can't get in or out of town.
Wow.
So I got myself there mid-January, and I was like, what am I I doing? What am I doing here in this part of the world in January of all things? Like feeling also kind of like I had planned on living in Europe. Why am I here also? So I was kind of a few days of, oh my God, what do I do with my life? And then somehow, I think it was day 4 of bleak January in beautiful, lovely Stratford. Love my community there, but it's just at that point, it was kind of something hit. I don't understand how it happened, but it was like, this is my mission in life. Women composers, piano music to start with, solo piano music to start with. I think if you looked at my search history on my iPad at that time, just days and days of like all day, everything was just researching IMSLP and all over the internet for all these women. And I don't know, it's just, I don't know how it happened, but it became clear to me, okay, I need to build a program of all women composers. So I started with composers born in the mid 1800s, thinking that Fanny and Clara, they're fine. They don't need me, you know, they got their marketing is going fine. But I just want to explore composers after that, but just limit it to a certain time and style. So that's where I began. And then I was like, well, okay, why not make this a series of recordings? And so it just it grew and it grew. And so my vision is that there are 6 volumes in this project called En pleine lumière, which translates in full light, because it's time to shine a light on these women that there's no justification for them not to be heard. And as I started to explore them, it just felt so freeing and so liberating. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but it just feels like, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
You know? So I've decided that this project, En pleine lumière, is 6 volumes. And each volume deals with about a 30-year span of when the composers were born. So I started there like 1840 to 70. Volume 2, which was to have been recorded a month ago. Oh well. It's going to be probably postponed to 2021. So Volume 2 is 1870 to 1900. Volume 3, 1900 to 1930. 1930 to 60, 60 to 90, and then the current new, my kids' generation, born in the 90s. So that takes us up to Volume 6. So it's a little bit big as far as what I'm going to need financially for it, but so far the response has been really wonderful, and I think I'm confident it's all going to work out once we can get out of the house and maybe even fly in planes and things like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know, like, it just overwhelms me, the thought of having, like, where do you start to put together a recording? Like, how do you do it? Do you just go rent a place and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
So can you talk us through a little bit? Because I know it's not like you have done this on a label. You've done this yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's your baby, totally. And can you talk to us about getting a producer? Because we've talked about that on Twitter a little bit.
Yeah.
How important that is, that you find somebody that you trust. So talk us through that.
I would say that, like, I have the confidence going forward with this project as an independent project. And I actually have my own company, sort of semi-officially, called Green Butterfly Music. So that all of my projects on the women composers are under that. I have that confidence in doing it because of my experience doing my Grieg recordings. I have 4 recordings of Grieg's music. Well, 3.5 of them are solo piano music, and then the 4th one is half solo and half with a singer. And those are under the label Chestnut Hall Music, where I worked with my producer, Earl McCluskey, who is a genius at especially the editing and mastering. It's incredible. So I felt though that with this project, I wanted all the energy, all the parties involved to be women. I just felt like it should be aligned with female energy all the way around. So nothing against Earl, my former producer, but I just, yeah, he's a guy. And nothing against guys. It's just that this feels like it's time to, you know, support women in their work. So I was looking for ideally someone who's got the capability to be engineer, producer, and masterer. My first recording, in fact, before the Grieg, was a Schubert Winterreise. And there I had a brilliant, one of Canada's finest producers. And he just did the engineering, the producing, and took it and edited it and did it all. And then we got it. With Earl, the process was more, we had an engineer that came with the Glenn Gould studio at the Canadian Broadcasting Company in Toronto. And then Earl was there as producer. And also I would have an extra set of ears along, like a friend, a musician. I had 3 different people for 3 different recordings. Just to, you know, help buffer the process, because it's, sometimes I can get a little bit psychotic, neurotic in that process. So self-doubt can, you know, take over. So just to have conversations about, and, you know, just people who know me and know how to
That's so
the
smart.
process. It was
so
very
smart.
important for me. So blessed to have people that were available and interested in helping me with that. So yeah, an engineer, a producer, and an extra set of ears. Like, that's luxurious and was necessary, I think. So now the cost of engineer and producer, I wanted to put that into one person, which actually I had also for my second volume of Grieg. So I looked the Google machine, female classical recording engineer, producer, master. Okay, Google is just like, no, too many words, too many. So, and I did eventually, through lots and lots of Googling, find that there were maybe 1 or 2 people that showed up on the internet in the US, women working as a producer of classical music. Yeah. So, but they seem to be like in the bracket where working with large orchestra projects. And so that was not my budget. So then I was like, bingo. In German, there's one word. So instead of all those 7,000 terms for Google. So Tonmeister is the male and Tonmeisterin is the female. So I was like, I got this. I'm going to Google Tonmeisterin or classical Tonmeisterin. And there were several women that showed up in the results. So I was like, okay, I'm recording in Germany, I'm pretty sure. And then I looked through them and, you know, read up on them and listened to some of their products. And then I just had this feeling about this one. I'm pretty darn intuitive. So I just felt like, yeah, that feels right. And so I got in touch with her. We had a good conversation. Her name is Kaling Hunk, and she turned out to be the perfect person for me to work with. She's got all the technical equipment and skills, and she arranges for me the venue and the piano delivery and tuning, and she just did all of that for me, because it's a little tricky for me to do from here and to do it in German. I mean, my German it's adequate, but no, not for that. So, and then when we were actually working together, she was just the best. Her ears, so precise, so detailed. And she had such a great way of kind of pushing me, encouraging me, but not in a way where I would get psychotic, neurotic, like could happen. Not saying it has happened ever in my life, but it could happen. Yeah, so she was just brilliant, just like, no nonsense. Okay, can you just go back to that section and we want to do this, and I'd like to hear you do it this way. And so it was, she just brought out I think, the best that I could do at that time in that place.
Erica, I feel like this woman is your spirit, is your kindred spirit. Like you just described Erica, like Erica produced and recorded your album for you.
Yeah, that's an idea. We should talk about
Sandra is gonna be my producer for my recording. We've already talked about that, right?
Yeah, I'm up for it.
Oh, that's
my
so
gosh.
good.
I love the recording process. I used to hate it, but I love it now. And especially in that way, working with her. Well, the challenge is now, of course, I can't go to Germany right now. The idea was to record it last month, volume 2. We pushed it to July. Obviously, that's not happening. And now, beautiful Colleen, she's having her first child in September. So that's incredible. But I think it means that we're looking at early 2021. And at that time, I'll have 2 volumes ready to record. So we'll just record for days and days and days and days. Because I got to get this project moving, So.
Sandra, I have a follow-up question for you. Because I think recording can be such a daunting experience as a performer. I love performing live because once it's done, it's out there, it's done. You walk away, it was what it was. Mm-hmm. But for performing, of course, that's not usually the option. You want to get it right, whatever.
For recording, yeah.
So what advice would you give somebody who is setting out to do their first recording? How do you approach it mentally?
Yeah. I think, first of all, it's not just mentally, but the logistics have to really be worked out, and raising money is really important. You don't want to do it on the cheap, because then you're going to be anxious about, you don't have enough time to go back and try things. I also think it's really important in the curating of the program and the planning of the repertoire to just be super in love with what you're doing and, passionate about the music. That really helps take you through any of those moments where it gets kind of crunchy. But yeah, for me, those first few recordings of the Grieg albums, I would say it was really important to have that faith in the instrument, in the venue, in the producer, in the engineer. All of that has to be just high level, in preparation for it. The more times you can play that program for audiences, even if it's one person at a time, play it, perform it, feel the feedback about the repertoire, feel how you can find so many possibilities within each phrase, that's really key. The more you can perform it ahead of time, the better. Then on the day, I tend to like to record an album over 3 days. So you have a day 1 where you're like, I get this all done. And then day 2 where you're like, okay, phew, got a good chunk in the can. And then day 3, like, oh shit, why did I leave these really hard pieces for the last day? No, I don't know why I end up doing it that way every time. Anyway, I think I've learned. I think it's going to be different this next time. But yeah, because you don't want to do it in a rush. You don't want to feel tired, and your body gets some tension over a few hours of doing it, right? So no matter what. So I generally did 4 hours, 3 days in a row. Although with Colleen, we had the space for all day, so we could just be more relaxed about using the hours. But yeah, having time is also really important. And then just really having a rapport with the person you're working with, or the team you have, I think that's key. Yeah. So key.
That's great. so hopeful to hear, because I know we've toyed around with the idea of doing a recording at some point.
Yeah.
But like,
do it.
I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't know. You know.
I'll come and help you.
Yeah, when we first started talking about it, it did seem very, very overwhelming. But having just spoken with you and, you know, hearing your perspective, and we actually talked to a band leader that's out in Phoenix, Arizona. She's amazing as well. And she, very different, from a different angle, a door, a different window, she echoed the same sentiments that you did, with the element of preparedness and making sure you know exactly what you want. In her situation, they had a limited amount of time, so they had to they had a really good relationship with the people, with their team, as you know, sort of echoed the same sentiments that you stated, and you know, just let's do this, boom, 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 knock it out.
I would just maybe add about the actual process in the recording. I can't remember now who I was listening to. One of your interviewees was talking about that. And for me, I need to be in the flow, which is why I can't be the one to decide which take or how should we go back to here. I need to be able to, you know, there's those two different ways of being, that very sort of critical, cutting it apart and getting all worried about details, and then flow. And so what I've ended up coming to is insisting to whoever I'm working with, I have to play you 2 full takes to start with, maybe even 3, but 2 for sure, so that we have the whole scope of the architecture of how it's going to be. And then you can start coming at me with, okay, Barb, blah, 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 and what about that note? That didn't sound, that was, I think there was noise in the fiddle. Yeah.
You have to get a sense of that.
Absolutely necessary. And not even think about, oh shit, that was wrong. Blah, blah. No, just do it. And, but in the meantime, another thing that I think is important for me is to have the score in front of me. I'm performing from the score in recording, because I don't want to have to waste time looking for where are you starting from, blah, blah. And then of course coming with scores for the team, bar numbers, everything very specific and planned, and so
so changing direction from recording self to teaching self. You've been teaching music online for many years before, you know, people were forced to, right? And the current situation we are in now. What are your feelings about teaching that way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started doing that, I think, already in 2012 or 13 for sure. And I never really thought it was a big deal to make that shift. At that time, though, like, I use Skype generally, sometimes FaceTime, but at that time, Skype was kind of not where it is now, and it gets held up, and then goes really fast, and so sometimes it'd be like, is that my student that has a rhythmic problem, or so that was a little iffy at the beginning back then, but that tends to not happen anymore. Maybe a little bit now in the pandemic because of everyone being online, living their life there. So I thought it was kind of funny that when, as you say, you were all forced to start teaching on, I'm seeing all over Twitter and everywhere, so much anxiety about it. Oh, I have to teach online. I have to set up my studio for it. I never had a studio. I just travel around the world with my iPad or my iPhone and sometimes, like, I often teach where I don't have a piano in front of me. So, but I can make that work. Like, you know, it's nice to have the scores on hand if it's something you don't know, but of course there's so much repertoire that I'm using that I pretty much know like the back of my hand. So even that, you know, it can be done in a cafe if it has to be. If the internet is good, that's the main thing for me. It's just my iPad, maybe these guys, and a good internet connection. I don't think it's so complicated, but maybe for voice teachers, that's a little different. Yeah, so I've enjoyed doing it that way, and now I pretty much teach exclusively online. Not because of the pandemic, but I was already exclusively teaching online for the last 2 years or so. And one challenge about it is that somehow it's easier for students to bail on a lesson. I don't know why that is. But it's just like, oh, sorry, I forgot, or sorry, I got to do his birthday party, or blah, blah. So that's something I don't really understand, and maybe I just need to get a more professional policy about lesson cancellation. But other than that, it works just fine. And then when I am in the country or in the city that my student lives in, I do have students on both sides of the ocean. When I'm there, then they can have a lesson in person now and then. So then that sort of balances out some of the things that maybe I would have a little more difficulty doing. But yeah, I love it, and that's how I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
So anyone in the world, anywhere.
Yeah.
Email Sandra today.
I have just a very few students, and I, have room for maybe a couple more, but that's how it is right now.
That's really cool. So looking back on all these kind of different roles that you've taken on, and your journey thus far, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out or like exploring maybe a journey also in music or also in being a pianist that you maybe wish someone had told you or you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think music school, of course, has its purpose. I'm not going to diss that or anything. I struggled being in school. I don't know why exactly. All the requirement stuff, I loved my master's degree at Westminster Choir College in vocal coaching and accompanying. But still, there's you have to find the right teacher, first of all, if you're going to go to music school. Like, you have to know ahead of time going into a school. I think try out the teacher for a few lessons, and that has to feel like supportive, and that you speak the same language. So that's important in that way. But no matter what that education is like, I imagine that you're going to end up having to figure a lot of it out yourself. We all know, I imagine, I think I've heard you say that, like, where was the training on how to be an entrepreneur? Because that's what we are as well, right?
Yeah.
And also, the thing that comes up in studying in an institution is all the requirements and all the shoulds. You have to meet these repertoire requirements, and maybe that's not you. Maybe you're a person who is equally a composer and a pianist, and so would you be able to do an exam as that? No, you have to do your exam either as a composer, as a pianist. I had this brilliant student who's now super successful, incredible, gifted musical theater composer. And she writes the book sometimes as well as the music. Britta Johnson is her name. And I remember when she was 15, like, I could see that this is where she was going to go, like the next kind of Sondheim level kind of person. What are we going to do? Where are you going to go to learn that? So it was first trying out some theater training. I think they called it drama program. Yeah, but what about the musical part? The pianist part? The composer part? Okay, so actually then she switched to faculty of music. But then that's so much about, do you know your Schumann repertoire and your those requirements. So eventually it all came together, but like some people have, you know, everyone has their own unique way of being a musician and being a person and an artist. So I think it's hard to find ways to be all of that when you're in an institution. So just to know that and try to find the balance between exploring who you are and expressing who you are as you are also juggling all these requirements. Then, of course, once you've graduated, then what do you do? That's when the real figuring out starts to happen. And that's, I think, when it really becomes important to, like, who are you? You know, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Still trying to figure out how to do me. But anyway.
Well, and maybe we never really know. And,
Right.
you know, and we're always changing too.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
So in the next section, we're going to ask you two things and you have to choose one. It's called this or that.
What do you prefer, mountains or ocean?
Ocean.
Oh,
By a mile.
quick.
wow.
By a mile.
Straight out the jump.
Nothing against mountains.
I
Especially
was going to
Erica's.
say, shoot, we can't get her to move here then.
Yeah.
I do love Erica's mountains, but anyway, no. Ocean.
Okay, next one. Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
I mean, they're both lovely. Dark chocolate gives me a headache, so I'm going to go with milk.
That works. That works.
Summer or fall?
Fall. I hate heat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so now this is not this or that. This is just a grab bag for us to get to know you a little bit better.
Yes. Okay. So the first question is, if you could, in a fantasy world, live any country in the world right now, where would you pick?
Right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Right now.
If COVID wasn't happening, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super blessed with how it all worked out here, and I'm in Canada, in my hometown, in my home that I grew up in. But I always have this like need to be on both sides of the ocean. So like lifelong, since that time I spent a year in Copenhagen, I've just always felt like this is great about North America. This is great about Europe. I need both. So Iceland.
Ooh, good.
In the middle.
Yeah.
Well, not the middle, a little bit more towards Europe. I love Iceland so much. Oh my gosh. The earth is so generous there. It's gorgeous.
Oh, wow. I like how you say that. The earth
Yeah.
is so
Oh,
generous.
it's so giving, gorgeous. Yeah. Love it.
Okay, I've got to go.
Definitely.
We need to get a concert there.
We'll do
So
it.
We'll
Yeah.
work on that.
Get that
So
arranged.
good.
Yeah.
All right, Sandra, you are so good at the visual stuff, and I know you're on Instagram. So who's somebody on Instagram that you love to follow, that we should all follow?
Oh. I mean, I love people who are excellent photographers. But also because of my Copenhagen connection, I would probably say one of the people I really enjoy is somebody, they used to call themselves Copenhagenizer. I think he just goes by his name now, Mikael Colville Anderson. And his gig was, he's very into bicycle culture and urban design and like living in cities that make sense. And I really resonate with that. And he's also, like me, Canadian with one Danish parent. So I feel that resonance there. I've never met him. He doesn't know me, but the odd time I just comment, and I feel like sometime I'm going to run into him in Copenhagen. I'm going to say, yo. I just find it really interesting. And he gives like talks all over the world about, and I think he's done a television series on like urban areas that are, you know, coming out of some struggles and how they're doing things in a good way for humans to live in. Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, so the last grab bag question is, what is your desert island book?
Oh, for someone who doesn't read much anymore lately, but presumably on a desert island, there's no reason not to read anymore. So I would want to get something a little bit ambitious. So, because I'd be there a while, probably. I wouldn't want to run out of book and then be like, now what I do. So I think I would choose something like, I was thinking of Goethe, one of Goethe's major works, like maybe Wilhelm Meister. And I think it would be cool to have it in German, because then, you know, that would take me even more time to like really, it'd be cool if there's like a side-by-side translation and I could choose. If I don't feel like reading German one day, I could read in English. But yeah, something substantial like that of Goethe, because he's like, yeah, one of the greats, and we just never take the time to go back to that kind of really important formative stuff. Yeah.
Ambitious indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did
just
study
put it in German.
I did study German Lit while I was doing my undergrad, and I when I was living in Copenhagen, I taught in a German school and worked in a German church. So I do love using my German. So I think the desert island would be a good place to just make sure I'm keeping up with it.
Well, we'll try to find you a copy with both.
Thanks. Okay.
How many languages do you speak conversationally in that?
Yeah, I mean, Danish is my second language that I'm most comfortable in. I teach some of my students in Danish. Every time I finish a lesson, I'm, how did I just do that? That's so weird. But so, and then from Danish, you have an entryway into Norwegian and Swedish, at least to read, you know. German is quite good. I do get it mixed up with Danish. If I'm, you know, recently speaking Danish, then German tends to come out half Danish, but I understand it completely. And then, of course, as a Canadian, I had pretty good training in French. And again, I can understand it. I can read it. I need to be there for some weeks before it doesn't get all jumbled with the other languages. And then my mother's heritage is Latvian, one of the Baltic countries. So, you know, I manage in Latvian-ish. So, yeah, it's a cool language, very beautiful language. So it's very fun to pronounce those sounds. Yeah.
Right. I think it's so, you know, being in the United States, it's so out of our wheelhouse to, you know, speak anything other than English. You know, when we've traveled, been to Europe twice, and it's amazing to me how quick it goes. So we went to Italy for a couple of weeks and learned conversational Italian. And while you're there, immersed in the culture and, you know, attempting to make conversation with, you know, Italians is super fun.
Right.
But then, you know, a few years of having no one to speak Italian with, and, you know, it goes, I still know how to say, I would like some red wine, please. I will never not know how to say that.
Let's hear it.
Oh, vino rosso, per favore.
I mean, that's crucial. And then with all the terms that we know from being musicians, you've got a leg up as well, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and then and then we went to Belgium for a few weeks as well. So being in the French speaking part, my husband speaks French pretty well. I speak conversational French. I'm not very good, but, and then a 20-minute train ride, you're closer to the Netherlands where they speak Dutch, and neither of us had any idea what to do, where to go. I mean, we're like, ugh.
In Europe, it's so normal to be multilingual. Like, it's no big deal. My mother is trilingual. I think my grandmother was more than that. When I was teaching in Copenhagen, I had this one child come to me just before I had to quit there and move out. This child was 9, and she already spoke 5 languages. So we were like, well, what language do you want your piano lesson in? Well, it doesn't matter, just mix it up, you know? She had, I think,
German, no big deal.
One German parent, one Italian parent. She had lived in Montreal, so she knew French, and English. And then now she was in Denmark, so now she's learning Danish. She was 9, 5 languages. Love
Yay,
it.
brain plasticity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
I love languages. Yeah.
Sandra, it was wonderful, so great to have you
Aw.
with us today. We really appreciate your time and your efforts and your inspiring, wise words. So thank
my
you so
goodness.
much for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank
My joy, totally. It was so lovely to meet you, two new people, and see you again, Erica.
Yeah, same here.
Sarah, Michelle, and Erica. Brilliant. Thank you so much for what you're doing with your concerts and your music making, but also that you've got this project is huge. It's really inspiring to watch the other people, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. So thank you.
Oh,
thank
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll talk soon.